Good morning, friends. Today we discuss about the topic geographical distribution of animals and barriers in animal distribution. Geographical distribution of animals, that is cosmopolitan, discontinuous, bipolar and isolated distribution. Barriers in animal distribution, physical, climatic and biological barriers. First one, kinds of animal distribution. First, spatial distribution. This is the distribution of animals in the different parts of the world. It is of two kinds, that is geographical distribution and bathymetric distribution. Geographical distribution. This is the horizontal distribution of animals in the different geographical regions and natural habitats of the earth's surface. The study of the geographic distribution of animals is called zoogeography. Many species enjoy extensive and cosmopolitan distribution, whereas some enjoy discontinuous distribution. Based on the geographical distribution of vertebrates, the Earth's surface is divided into distinct regions called zoogeographical realms. Next, bathymetric distribution. This is the vertical distribution of animals on land and in water. It is of three kinds, namely geobiotic, halobiotic and limnobiotic. Geobiotic distribution is on land. Holobiotic distribution is in marine waters and limnobiotic distribution is in inland freshwater bodies. Geobiotic realms consist of several subdivisions known as biomes. Examples are deserts, forests, grasslands, tundras, curves, etc. Halobiotic realms include oceans, seas, etc. Limnobiotic realms include ponds, lakes, streams, rivers, reservoirs, etc. Second one, geographical or durational distribution. This is the distribution of animals in the geological part. So, it is related to the evolutionary history of life on Earth. It is revealed by the study of fossils. Patterns of animal distribution. Based on the extent of geographical distribution, animal distribution can be classified into four types. That is cosmopolitan, discontinuous, isolated and bipolar. First one, cosmopolitan distribution. It's also called the universal, worldwide or continuous distribution. As the term suggests, it is the distribution in which the members of a species are present all over the world. Such animals are capable to adjusting to a wide range of environmental conditions. Animal species having wide range and enjoying cosmopolitan distribution with tolerance and adaptation to a wide variety of environmental conditions are known as Eurotropic species. Those found in restricted regions with a limited range of adaptation to environmental conditions are called Xenotropic species. Eutropic species are endowed with a wide variety of adaptation and adjustment to diverse environmental conditions. So, they can thrive under different environmental conditions, migrate to long distance, and cross natural barriers. On the other hand, xenotropic species are adapted only to a particular type of environments and cannot thrive natural barriers. The best example of eutropic species is mankind. Other examples are green mussel, brine shrimp, bats, rats, cuckoos, hawks, etc. The number of rarely cosmopolitan species is very few. Xenotropic species include sluggish, sessile or sedentary forms. Next, discontinuous distribution. It's also called a disjunctive distribution. This is the distribution in which the members of the same or closely related species are distributed in localized, widely separated and geographically unconnected or discontinuous regions. This stands in contrast to the usual continuous distribution in which the members of the same or closely related species or genera are distributed in geographically continuous regions. Reasons for discontinuous distribution. The animals exhibiting discontinuous distribution today are believed to have a continuous distribution in the past. Various hypotheses have been proposed to explain the reasons for discontinuous distribution. One of the seemingly valid explanation is that of Darwinson. He suggested three mechanisms as follows. First one, migration of land animal across water to reach oceanic island. Second one, continental drift and submergence of land bridges separating the originally connected or continuous region. Third one, extinction of animals in those areas which are in between the regions of their current distribution. Discontinuous distribution could be due to various other factors also, such as climatic changes, predation pressure, natural calamities, diseases, formation of new barriers due to geographical changes, etc. Examples of discontinuous distribution: Notodrilus, peripatus, lungfishes, flightless birds, pouched mammals, camelidae, etc. First one is the peripatus. One of the most popular examples of discontinuous distribution is peripatus. It is a genus of onychophora. It is said to be a living fossil because it has been unchanged for approximately 570 million years. It lives only in moist habitats such as tropical forest floor and is rotting logs. It is nocturnal and carnivorous, feeding on small livers, insects and crustaceans of larger insects. Members of this genus are distributed in different parts of the world which are no geographical proximity and continuity. They are found in America, Africa, India, Malaysia, New Zealand and East Indies. Camelidae. Another example is family Camelidae, camels and llamas, which camels are distributed in Asia and Africa. Their relatives are found only in South America. The origin of the family was in North America. From there, they migrated to Asia across the shallows, Bering Straits and hence to Africa and South America through the Isthmus of Panama. Prolonged isolation leads to the evolution of the animals, camelids, to the present day camel and llama. Third one, isolated distribution. As the term suggests, isolated distribution refers to the distribution of animals exclusively in the isolated regions of the earth. So, such isolated animals are confined to certain areas only and are not found anywhere else. Most of these animals are primitive and are often known as living fossils. The reason for their survival could be the absence of competition and predators in their areas of distribution. They are present in very few number. From a conservation point of view, they are very important because any change in their habitats could lead to their extinction. Typical examples are Sphenodon of New Zealand, duck-billed platypus of Australia, Tasmania, Echidna of Australia, Tasmania and New Guinea, and marsupial opossum of Americas. Next, bipolar distribution. Distribution of animals exclusively in the polar Arctic, the North Pole, and Antarctic, South Pole regions with no representative elsewhere in the regions in between is known as bipolar distribution. The Challenger expedition of 1872-76 played a major role in exposing bipolar distribution. The ship, commanded by Captain George Norris, sailed from Portsmouth in England on December 21, 1872 under the scientific supervision of Thomson. It travelled nearly 70,000 miles, surviving and exploring. The result was the report of the scientific result of the exploring voyage of HMS Challenge during the years 1873-76, which among other discoveries catalogued 4,000 previously unknown species of animals. Examples: Nidaria, Mollusca, Urochordata, Pisces. Bipolar animals are now considered to the relics of previously cosmopolitan fauna. Another view is that these animals migrated to the polar regions from the intermediate zones and underwent adaptive variations, thus getting adapted to the highly varied and extreme climatic conditions. These are the images of spatial distribution of animals and geographical distribution of animals. Here, peripatus and camelidae. Next, barriers to animal distribution. Dispersal barriers are the various factors which restrict or obstruct the dispersal and distribution of animals. They are significant both ecological as well as evolutionary in that they not only control animal distribution but also play an important role in the geographical and climatic isolation of populations. There are three categories of dispersal barriers, namely physical barriers, climatic barriers and biological barriers. First one, physical barriers. Physical barriers are the physical obstructions which prevent animal distribution. There are several kinds such as topographical barriers, salinity barriers, current barriers, depth barriers and distance barriers. Topographical barriers. These include water bodies such as oceans, seas, lakes and rivers, high altitude mountain ranges, vast deserts and wide stretches of plain lands and dense forest tracts. Water bodies restrict the distribution of terrestrial vertebrates with the exception of the bats and flying birds. The oceanic environment surrounding Australia is the single major barrier that limits immigration as well as immigration into and out of Australia. The reason for the uniqueness of Australia's terrestrial fauna is perhaps their barrier. The nearly 400-kilometer wide Mozambique Channel that separates Madagascar from the African mainland makes the faunal changes between Africa and Madagascar impossible. This might be the reason why the fauna of the two regions are distinctly different. High altitude mountain ranges with snow-covered or rocky peaks are formidable barriers to non-avian animals. So, the two sides of such mountain ranges will have different types of fauna. The Himalayan mountain range provides the best example for this. It separates the Indian subcontinent from the Tibetan plateau. The northern fauna resembles the European fauna, whereas the southern fauna resembles the African fauna. Vast deserts with extremely hostile climatic conditions are also barriers to animal dispersal. Terrestrial vertebrates cannot cross these barriers so that the faunal type on the two flanks of a desert will be distinctly different. For example, the presence of Sahara makes the flora and fauna of South Africa totally different from those of North Africa. Just as water bodies, wide stretches of open land masses are also effective barriers to the dispersal of aquatic animals. This is evident from the fact fishes of the west coast of Panama were different from those of the east coast before Panama Canal was built. Some species of fishes are found on both the sides. This reveals that such fishes have been able to move along the canal from one coast to the other. This is topographic barriers. Next, salinity barrier. Salinity of seawater is not usually a dispersal barrier to marine organisms. Still, freshwater animals are prevented from dispersal by saltwater bodies. Salinity is a most effective barrier to the dispersal of amphibians, which cannot endure saline water. This is the reason why amphibians are altogether absent in oceanic Ireland. Salinity of seawater remains almost constant and hence it does not form a barrier to the dispersal of marine organisms. However, near around river mouth, salinity changes very often and acts as a barrier of the dispersal of shallow water littoral animals. Current barrier. Water currents are effective dispersal barriers in low-tide environments. In this case, swift currents and high waterfalls are major impediments to upstream dispersal of animals. Next, distance barrier. Even small distance are dispersal barriers to small-sized animals and also to those with poor locomotor powers. So, even in the absence of any other natural dispersal barriers, their population may remain isolated with much restricted distribution. Next, depth barriers. Depth of the water column is often a dispersal barrier to some animals, inhibiting the littoral zone. The animals which cannot move beyond a narrow range of depth are called stenobatic animals, and those which can move down to deep depth are called eurybatic animals. Thus, depth of the water column is a dispersal barrier to stenobatic animals. The presence of high ridges and deep channels in the ocean floor is a dispersal barrier to some bottom-dwelling animals. Second one, climatic or ecological barriers. For the success of a species, conducive climatic conditions are very important. Temperature, moisture, amount of sunlight, etc. are the climatic factors which can serve as a barrier for the distribution of animals. For example, Arctic animals such as reindeer and polar bear cannot survive in tropical regions. The same is true for equatorial species for living in polar regions. Climatic barriers include abiotic environmental factors such as light, temperature, humidity, etc. First one, light as a barrier. Sunlight is a physical barrier to the dispersal of animals which do not prefer light. Example are nocturnal animals, subterraneous animals, cave-dwelling animals, etc. Exposure to light is even fatal to some insects such as springtails and mites. Next, temperature as a barrier. Temperature controls the animal distribution of serving as a limiting factor. This is particularly important in the case of poikilopterms. The freezing temperature of the polar regions prevent the dispersal of the animals from tropical and subtropical zones to polar zones. Next, humidity as a barrier. Humidity or atmospheric moisture is a limiting ecological factor, and in that capacity it controls the distribution of animals. The dispersal of some animals to high humid regions is exclusively forbidden. Third one, biological barriers. Biological barriers include food, predation, pressure, parasitism, sedentary habit, competition, etc. Many kinds of insects are dependent on the particular species of plants for their food, shelter, breeding places, etc. Predation pressure is a major barrier to the dispersal of prey animals. The distribution of prey species is therefore restricted to safe areas where their predators are absent or very rare. Sedentary or sessile habit of animal is a major dispersal barrier to many animals. Since they have little or no locomotor powers, they are usually found in aggregation in much restricted areas. Homing insects are often regarded as minor dispersal barrier. It involves the establishment and defense of specific areas of animals, usually during breeding season. Competition is a distribution barrier, especially to primitive and unspecialized or less adapted species. Most of them cannot survive the competition from highly specialized and well-adapted components. So they are restricted to safe survival pockets where competition and predation pressure are almost absent or minimal. For example, sphenodon, egg-laying mammals, some flightless birds, etc. are restricted to regions where their natural enemies are absent. Thank you.